With camp season coming closer and closer as every day closes, there are a interesting subset of players who, some may be mainstays on this roster, some may be guys that we're still thinking about as developmental, who might be running short on their time on the Cleveland Browns roster. Who are these people? Well, let's talk about it after I give a shout out to the patreon.com dog check tier members. And as always, I start with Fred Pratt III, David Valtier, Relentless Buck, Chunt, Rex Kaufman, The Real Quincy Carrier, Kevin Johnson, Marino V, Cleveland Cart, Matt H, Sign Sheets, Gemini, Fight Dirty 74, Yo-Yo, Matt Lloyd, Paul Wilcox, Hundo Magnifico, Rob Ferron, Kyle Stouffer, Lukey from Munich, Dave Roth, J Guy 101, Joe Bobby, Brad Cowbo, Dylan W, James McGinley, Arenda Hall, Chad Gimme, David Maldonado, Dylan Hale, Josh Bendor, Mark M, TJ Showman, Stuart Moore, Cleveland BCI, Robert Jermaine Jr., Dave Mike May, John Cummings, Andrew Hirsch, Curtis Bear, Brock Kumar, John Albert, Masayua, Buds Roland, James Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Philip Wilcoxon, Marie Vivert, Sean Barron, Goggles Pisano, Corporal Nick Lopez, Dom Gazzulo, Nick Nasty, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216, Anthony Latham, Christian, Dave Strong, Matt Stone, Charles Work, Billy Moose Gentry, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, Dog Pound Kai, Greg Ehlers, Austin Bolin, Kirkabar, Lydia Mahawk, Jesus Serrano, Chris Phones, Picktown Browns backers, Mark Kahn, Max Owl Dojo, and Water Bear Marketing. Again, guys, thank you so much for the support. It means a ton. Now let's talk about the guys on the bubble on the 2021 Browns. Now, when I say on the bubble, some of this is going to be more loose. Like, there are going to be people on this list who might not get cut, but they may get traded, or they may just not have a real defined role on the team anymore when there's somebody who people expect to. Other guys, I think, may outright get cut. And I'm going to start this list off with somebody who fits the first description of what I mentioned. That's Greedy Williams. Greedy right now is in a position battle with Greg Newsome. And the reality of the situation is that it's really hard to see a path for Greedy Williams to start as things continue to go on. Because the one scenario where you would see Greedy start, for most people, you would think would be if Greg Newsome was not ready to start in year one. Let's say that is the case. I think it's actually more likely, if that's the case, that you see Troy Hill go from slot to outside corner, because he's done that at a high level before with the LA Rams, and he can continue to do that for the Cleveland Browns. So you would just put him on the outside with Denzel Ward, and then have MJ Stewart, who was pretty decent as a slot corner at the end of last year, just fill in there. So even kind of the best case scenario, Greg Newsome not being ready, you might not even see Greedy on the field. And even when you look at that position battle with Greg Newsome, that's a real uphill battle for Greedy Williams. I mean, Greg Newsome, he's a first-round draft pick of the people who are currently picking the players for the Cleveland Browns. Greedy Williams was not selected by anybody who is in the front office right now. He was selected in that 1 year that Andrew Berry wasn't in the front office. He was selected solely by John Dorsey and John Dorsey's staff. So, his support around the building, as far as the commitment that they have to Greedy Williams, could be all over the place. It could be very likely that they have continued the same commitment that John Dorsey had to Greedy Williams, or it could be that they see this whole situation completely differently and want to put Greg Newsome out there as soon as possible. And if not, Troy Hill, who they signed in free agency. All of this means is that it's going to be a rocky path to see the field. And then when you're talking about not seeing the field for Greedy Williams, at least as a starter or a boundary starter, then you have to talk about where else he can fill in, and that's special teams, and that's being thrown in there as an extra interior corner. If one thing we've learned about Greedy Williams, that he has not mastered zone cornering, right? When he's looked good in years past, it's because you allowed him to play press man. He's not been a great zone guy, so putting him inside might not be the best look. Then when you talk about special teams, Greedy Williams has never struck anybody as a great special teams prospect, and I wouldn't assume that he would be a great special teams prospect. And now you have this weird situation, right, where you have a guy who could be a number 2 corner, who could be as talented to be your other boundary corner or some other team's boundary corner, but you really have no place to put him, and the roster space for DBs is going to be tight this year, right? They kept 6 last year. You have to assume that they're probably going to keep 6 or 10 between the safeties and defensive backs. So that's Denzel Ward, that's Greg Newsome, that's Troy Hill, that's MJ Stewart, and then you have to fit Greedy, Robert Jackson, AJ Green. That's 3 people for 2 spots. And at least with Robert Jackson and AJ Green, if you're not going to start them, you have other places you can put them. And I know a lot of people bring up Terrence Mitchell. Terrence Mitchell was a pretty good special teamer. For Greedy Williams, I have no idea if he's ever played a snap of special teams, and I don't know how he's going to do in there, but that's probably going to be critical when it comes to him being able to just get a roster spot and be able to hold it down. I see very likely what is brewing here is that Greedy might get traded somewhere at the end of camp because he's kind of too good to just cut outright, but he's also somebody who might have a little bit of trade value. So I think that could be there. Also one of the things I don't think a lot of people consider when you talk about Greedy making the 53-man roster for the Cleveland Browns is that he has a massive injury history. And if he gets injured during the year, you're going to have to use one of your injury reserve spots on him. You're going to have to hold a roster spot for him whenever he is out and unavailable. You take that on top of the fact that he doesn't have a real defined spot to play, and it just makes it really hard for his case to be good enough to really make this team. So he's somebody I think is on the bubble and might be on the way out. Another guy I think is on the bubble, might be on the way out. Sheldrick Redwine. This is a dude who has had flashes here and there, but really inconsistent play. And when it's bad with Sheldrick, it's real bad. Not to say that he doesn't have as good. He is good to get a couple of interceptions. I think he got 2 in that Pittsburgh game at the end of the season. So, I'm not saying he hasn't contributed at all. But the fact is that the Browns overhauled specifically the safety room this offseason, and they have a lot of bodies rolling in this season, right? They kept 4 safeties last year. This year, they're going to have Grant Delpit back. They got John Johnson. They're going to keep Ronnie Harrison. And those are 3 guys already who are taking up 3 of the 4 spots that are going to play. So you would assume, that they're probably going to keep Richard LeCount. They might keep Javante Moffitt because, he does add some value in special teams. And then you have Sheldrick Redwine, who does play a little special teams, but has not been consistent there either. So that's just more of he has a difficult spot to fit in. A lot of safeties that have been added to this room, and I just don't know if he has a skill set valuable enough for this team in this situation to be able to stay on the team. Next guy I'm going to hit on is Chris Hubbard. And I'm not going to lie, if he does get cut or moved, I would be sad to see him go because I think he has been a pretty reliable hand as far as offensive line depth goes, and I think he's a pretty solid right tackle if you need to put him at right tackle. I think he got a bad rap from 2019, and I think he's somebody who could still play right tackle. But the facts are is that he's over 30. He's making more money than most of the other linemen that he's going to be competing with, and he's coming off of an ACL tear that happened pretty late in the season against the Giants, right, in New York. So that's later in the season, so we don't know when he's going to be coming back. He's a heavier guy. He's an older guy. ACL tears are much harder to come back from when you're in that class of people in the NFL. That there just alone makes it hard for him to be able to maintain his spot that he had last year. Then the Browns drafted in the 3rd round a good tackle, I think James Hudson from Cincinnati, which means that there's going to have to be another roster spot open for a tackle. He's a 3rd round pick, so he's going to outright make the team. You're not going to stash him on a practice squad or anything like that. And that also means that it's probably Chris Hubbard's spot. Blake Hance is also somebody who came in last year, did a little tackle, did a little guard here and there, actually held up pretty nicely. So all of that considered, you can just see it's very hard to see the spot being manifested for Chris Hubbard to continue to stay on the team. If he can, that would be awesome. He's somebody who can be a swing tackle, a swing guard, and a center. So that's always valuable. But the combination of Blake Hance and James Hudson might send him out of town just a little bit early. The next guy on this list is Ernest Johnson. He's another guy that I would be pretty sad to see go because I feel like he's been a valuable hand. I remember watching him in the AAF when he was with the Orlando Apollos and thinking that he could be a pretty decent player in the NFL. And he's turned out to be a decent, role player, end of the roster guy. I think he's a much better kick returner than people give him credit for. He's a good third running back, had a valuable run against the Indianapolis Colts, put that game away, and was somebody who unfortunately did not show that they could be the second running back if something happens to Hunt or Chubb when given extended carries for Ernest Johnson. So that might send him out of town. The Browns drafted Demetric Felton. If he can run a little better than Ernest, that's real trouble for him. But if he can run at all, that's also going to be trouble for Ernest because, Demetric can do everything Ernest can do, plus he's a better receiver than Ernest. So Ernest is definitely somebody whose roster spot is on watch. Jojo Natson is another guy that I want to talk about briefly. He's a guy who was supposed to be the kick returner, supposed to be the end-around guy, but then he tore his ACL, I think, in the first game of the year or right before the first game of the year, and you never really got to see him, and it's unfortunate for him, right? He was going to have a real opportunity to get some real time as a real punt returner in the NFL. It's going to be his first opportunity. Tears his ACL. 1 year later, the Browns keep the exact same wide receiving core. Everybody, Daryl Hodge, currently all 6 of the wide receivers from last year are returning, but they drafted Anthony Schwartz in the 3rd round, who's probably going to do everything you asked Jojo Natson to do. Anthony Schwartz has the speed to do the end arounds. He has the speed to do the kick returns, or Demetric Felton can do the kick returns. Now it's looking like Jojo Natson just doesn't have a role on this roster in the NFL, moves quick. Jojo Natson's an example of it. Just one injury in 1 year where you might have gotten your chance, and it's over like that. So Jojo Natson's another guy who's going to have a really strong camp in order to keep his spot, because that would force the team to keep like 7 or 8 wide receivers at that point. The next guy, and the guy I think we all know is going to be on this list, is Mack Wilson. He's looking like odd man out at this point. I know Mack is always tweeting about how he's going to re-up this year and be much better. I think he has gotten bigger, stronger this year, and I'm happy for Mack, and I think he really needs to do those things, and he really needs to have a strong camp, because right now it's going to be a decision of, do we keep Mack Wilson or do we cut one of the guys we've drafted in the last 2 years to keep Mack Wilson? That's the question that Mack Wilson's going to be up against. That's not a great spot to be at if you're Mack Wilson, right? Because what we know at the linebacking room right now, Anthony Walker's making the team, obviously. JOK is making the team, obviously. Malcolm Smith is obviously making the team. They re-signed him this year. And then you look at the other guys. Sione Takitaki, I know a lot of people don't think he's going to make the roster. A lot of people think that he's not good, but he was really good in run defense last year. You can't say the same anybody else beneath him on the depth chart. So I don't see why he would be cut unless they just don't think his play style fits the defense anymore, even though he was good last year in this defense. Then you got Jacob Phillips, you got Tony Fields, and that's 6 guys already, right? So Mack Wilson, he's the 7th guy. He's the odd man out. He has to have an incredibly strong camp for them to either cut Jacob Phillips, who they drafted pretty early in last year's draft, or cut Tony Fields and hope he makes it to the practice squad, who's a guy they drafted in the 5th round. Both of those scenarios just don't seem very likely, and it seems like a situation where Mack Wilson's back is going to be against the wall from the start of OTAs till the end of training camp, and if he does not have a massive camp, he will not be on this team in 2021, and for his sake, I do hope he has a good camp whether he makes this team or not, because a strong camp could be the difference from him still being in the NFL after the Browns cut him or just being another guy who's out of the league. And I think Mack Wilson can stay in the NFL if he just has a strong camp. So I hope Mack has a strong camp, but Mack's also massively on the bubble this year. But that's it for my list. Let me know if you have a list of guys you think is going to be on the bubble this year for the Cleveland Browns in 2021. But again, guys, I want to thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.